5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The podcast will start.
The Porsche Sport Podcast, powered by Porsche Centre Leeds. Test drive the new Porsche Taycan and experience soul electrified. Porsche Mobile One Super Cup, Formula E, the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, 24-hour series, Porsche Carrera Cup, Endurance Motorsports, British GT, Porsche Club Great Britain, Sim Racing. The Porsche Sport Podcast.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Porsche Sport Podcast, because today we have a man capable of winning a motor race with me as his co-driver, so he must be pretty impressive. Mike Epps, former Road to Indy driver, British touring car driver and sim racer extraordinaire. Mike, welcome to the programme. How are you today? Have your shoulders recovered from carrying me around Le Mans?
Hello, mate. Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm just back fresh from a test day at Donington in these freezing temperatures, so I'm still warming up with a cup of tea, but I'm good, thank you.
And were you behind the wheel today or coaching?
I was coaching, and I think given that the lad was in a single-seater, I'm kind of glad I was, yeah. I'm sure Kat will agree. It's pretty cold this time of year to be doing 140 mile an hour with just a visor and a pair of gloves, pretty much keeping the wind out your face. So, yeah, coaching, but still shivering. So,
you need a good set of thermals. Imagine going testing at Knock Hill. Could be worse.
Yeah, no, thank you. Rather you than me, mate.
Absolutely. So, Mike, it's you've had quite a career, but where did it all start? What's the first kind of racing memory for you?
It's a weird one because a few people ask me this, and there's no other background in my family racing. So there's one guy called Harry Epps, I think they could find in the history books in like the 60s, but completely unrelated. So always played Gran Turismo and always played all the usual PS2 games and Need for Speed and Midnight Run, everything, the whole lot.
Classics.
Yeah, man.
Talk of touring cars?
Yeah. I've got all the old games as well. And then karting for birthdays was always happening, all that stuff, and it all sort of just headed in that direction. And then for a Christmas present, my grandma bought me it was like a kind of license test, not like a license test, but like a 5-day kind of course to head towards getting your kart racing license at Buckmore Park down in Kent. And that was Christmas 2005. So I was 12, something like that. So it's actually quite late compared to some. And kind of snowballed from there. Within a year, we'd bought a kart, and it was me and Dad with the sprockets and the chain lube and all that. And down at Rye House, where I mainly sort of, cut my teeth. And just went from there. You go club racing, bigger racing, and before you know it, you're in a race car.
Did you find yourself picking it up quite quickly, or who? I mean, because I come from you wouldn't believe this. I wanted to be a professional golfer when I was younger, and you're being coached all the time. You're coached you're given such close counsel and instruction at the start. But I get the impression that racing's not necessarily like that. It's a lot more seat of the pants in the early days. Was that what it was like for you, or did you have karting dad giving you all the Ayrton Senna lines?
I'm glad I didn't listen to him, if I'm honest. We definitely he had some good things here or there, but obviously having never driven a race car, and he had a sports car in his mid years. He opted in and bought a Nissan Skyline for a bit, which was fun.
Oh wow!
Interesting, yeah. But he never ever drove it fast. Never. Like, he just wasn't that type of driver. Wasn't that type of guy. So. Yeah, it was very much sort of learn on the way, and we were literally picking up drips and drabs of information from others on the day. You just never know what you'd learn. There was one morning where it was raining outside. My dad woke me up at about 8:30 and said, "Do you want to go out to Rye?" And I went, "I suppose so." And he was like, "Well, it's raining, might as well go and learn." And it was literally that, lad and dad. There was a guy at Rye House, Rob Hanscom, who ran a race team that I ended up racing for several years. He worked at the shop at Rye, and he was the guy who said to my dad, "You should buy a kart. You should have a look." And then we just got lots of information about jetting and all the fun little bits that you mess with when you're karting, and just learned. And I guess I won some novice awards at Rye, but within about a year, I was winning club races there, which was good. And then I progressed to Stars of Tomorrow and Super One in the years after that. So
what classes were you doing in kart? So you would have started, I guess, not cadets, I assume, so juniors.
Straight into junior max. Yeah. So I was 13, and we had a first kart chassis, which is really dated. Even at the time, that was an old thing. We bought the whole. Was that an
oxymoron? It definitely wasn't first. It was last kart.
No, it wasn't like Devenson's or anything like that. But yeah, we bought it for like 1,300 quid, including the trailer and all spares. It was literally, and it came in this wooden trailer with a tin top that like unfolded in it. It was like, I can't even describe what it looked like, but it was brilliant. And we had a little easy up awning that just perfectly sort of worked with the lid of the trailer to form like a little back to it. And that was what we had. And then, yeah, I don't think I won anything in that kart, to be fair. It was as stiff as anything. But yeah, that was that. So we had proper old karts, junior max and then senior max. That's all I did. So I was all Rotax, which is a shame because I'd have loved to try the KF classes and all the other European stuff, but they're more money than some car racing. So it just made sense to move straight up.
Absolutely. I mean, karts, the money that's spent is just crazy, isn't it? And it gets to a point, if you haven't got much in the first place, you have to make a decision, don't you, on where's best to spend that at the end of the day. But how did you find going from club karting to obviously doing something like Stars of Tomorrow? Obviously, I found it quite a jump going from club to national. Did you find the same? Or
so some of the club racing I did kind of had the weekends prior to some of those events. So you did often find the sort of national stars arrived anyway at the club events beforehand to get some practice in. So I'd sort of got to know some of them anyway. But yeah, once that first meeting, I think it was Kimbolton, 2007 was the very first one I remember. And it just, there's a different vibe, isn't there? There's a much more of a buzz because there's just more people there, more karts, there's more colours, more yeah, etc. So it wasn't a massive change, but obviously where you would normally win a club race, you'd probably come 12th in the Stars of Tomorrow race or something, the final. So it's just the grade is higher and it's a bigger hill to climb, and you realise you're a bit further down it at the start. But I never had amazing results. I was always up there and with a shout. But we never ran with, a Tony Kart team or a proper, front end affiliated team, as it were. We're always with a kind of close knit team that I'd known from the start. But it was a challenge, and yeah, I definitely had to grow a lot. But I raced with all the boys that you see now, like Jack Goff, Tom Ingram, lots of names that are currently in many Formula all around. I was racing with back in 07, 08.
Yeah. And how did you find the transition going from karts to cars? Because not everybody kind of gets that transition, really. And a lot of people think, obviously, karting is essential, but not everybody obviously makes that jump very well.
Well, I use this first day I ever did in a car as an example when I've had someone I'm coaching now had a bit of a bad day or had an off. Because I definitely had a bad first day when I jumped in a car. To be fair, it was a Formula V, so they're literally the least grippy cars on the planet in wet weather. So we had these, I don't know what they're called, they're like Dunlop bias ply tyres of some sort. And it's like a Formula Ford, but with less power. Silverstone pre-surface change, so it was actually really slippery in the wet. I made like 3 corners and realised that because in karts you have so much grip in the wet in comparison, and I had no coach, no real warning or anything as to what was coming. So the very first day I literally just went out the pits and completely overdrove it without any idea that I was doing that. And I see that now so much when I coach kids that in their first day in a Ginetta Junior. I say, look, this thing's got about 25% of the grip that you've experienced in the wet in karts, because it's just much heavier, the tyres are far less, grippy. Karting wets would be gone in a few laps when it dries out. Whereas, genetic juniors you could do all year on a set of tyres. So, I ended up parking the car up on the trailer and leaving about 10 in the morning that day. So it wasn't an easy transition at all. But after a couple of rough days, I then went on to miss the championship by 18 points or something like that, I think. So, and that was against guys that have raced it for 8-9 years. So a long time. So the transition's hard, but I think as long as you've got that mindset to change your style and improve and always be adaptive and, know that everything you're going to do in the future is not going to be exactly as you expect it to be, then I think you'll be fine.
And where did America come into it, Mike? When was the decision made to go out there, and how did you put the whole thing together?
Yeah, so it was unexpected, to say the least. I'd done Formula Renault Bark the year after Formula V, so I'd gone straight into that. We were with a pretty inexperienced bunch of guys. They're really nice from Lancashire, James Watt, and he ran a Porsche in WEC, but also had a small Formula Renault team. Me and a guy called Matt Tiffin teamed up together and raced in 2012. By the end, we were in the top 5. Sort of pushing towards podiums. And there were guys like Scott Malvern, Seb Morris, Josh Webster, you name it. There was 28 to 30 on the grid and a few extras at each round. So I think there were 36 or more cars in total over the year in the championship. When you look at, say, Formula Ford grid now, that's, twice, if not nearly 3 times as many guys. So it was really competitive. And a guy called Martin Pott, who actually lives in Towcester and ran a management company called P1 Sports, he contacted me and then put me in touch with a few guys in the States who were involved with Dan Weldon's career move over there. Put me in touch with a team, and we went over and did a test. All was really positive. I really liked the car. It was a really nice change of scenery for me to go over to test at an American circuit and just see America in general. And
was it, Mike?
Huh?
Which circuit was it? The first?
It was a circuit called Roebling Road. I can't actually remember where in the country it is. It's near, not a crazy amount away from Pennsylvania, I think. It's sort of that way. Actually, it might be a bit further south. It might be Savannah. I did so many areas in the States that half of it's a blur, if I'm honest with you, because it all happened so quickly. But I did a test there, only a few weeks after the end of the 2012 season. And before you knew it, we were looking at racing in America. And then it was New Year's Day, I think. It was just before New Year that I went down to Florida. Celebrated New Year there, and I was testing at Sebring on the 1st of January. And then that was it. I was over there for a month for some testing, and then by March we were racing. So it all came together very quickly. There were some American sponsors, there were some UK sponsors. We were still having to push a lot of our own money into it at that point, because I think some guys are able to get big sponsorship early on, and I think it's at that point in your career, it's unlikely that you're going to be fully funded as a driver. And I think a lot of people watching will agree with that. So it was a big commitment at the time, but it did start to pay off towards the end of that season. So it was a big move. The aim was to look at perhaps IndyCar and consider that as a dream at the time.
What was the first feeling with Sebring? Was it on the full track, or was it on the kind of club layout where they sort of cut a bit out?
It was full circuit. So
oh my!
I literally,
wow.
I know.
Happy New Year!
Yeah, I know. Mad, isn't it? I'd done one day, and then bang, Sebring straight away. And it's bumpy in one of those. I mean, it's literally a Van Diemen chassis with slicks and wings. So it's like a Formula Ford, really, but a fair bit quicker. And I can't remember what times we were doing around there, but it was 2 minute something low. But it was quick. The last corner was committed. You hardly braked. You kind of just dab the brake and roll it in around 140 on the entry, and you just roll the speed off through. And it's literally shaking your head all over the show.
Bobblehead.
Yeah, and you get this kind of weird. It's almost like a drum beating through the car as you go up the main straight, and it just gets faster and faster and faster, and it's you crossing all the lines in the concrete slabs of the runway.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was really cool, and that was when it had a wider, more open turn one as well. So
you could really fling it.
It was good.
Was it a Mazda engine still at that point?
Yeah, Mazda Z-Tech or Duratec, the 2-litre.
Oh, Sky Active, is it?
I'm not sure.
It's called? A high pitch, proper high pitch, buzzy little thing.
Yeah, up to about 7.1, 7.2, and rattle the hell out of any camera you put on the roll cage. So literally just, I don't know what it is about 2-litre Formula racing, but Kat will probably know. You put any GoPro on and it will shatter it within about 3 months. It's horrendous.
Did you enjoy it over in the States though? And was there much of a difference over there to then coming back here? Because I mean, I've never raced in the States, but I hear there's quite a difference there to obviously in Europe. Did you notice that yourself?
Yeah, it's a different mindset, different surroundings, different weather. Obviously, the logistics of racing over there are huge. You know, the thousands and thousands of miles the trucks travel through deserts and, you know, blizzards, literally everything. So, and a lot of the teams are based up in Indiana. Some are based down in Miami or Homestead or wherever. So they all live in completely different surroundings, you know. So it's literally a world of its own. You go over there and you don't hear anything about anything outside of America. It was quite eye-opening, actually, because I remember saying to my parents, I was like, I haven't really seen any world news. Like, all I see over here is just stuff about this state or that state, which kind of explains when you think about how things are today. Yeah. It was really good. There's amazing talent over there because you've got Brazil, you've got all sorts of other countries that are much closer to that part of the world, and they see that as a place to go and compete. And obviously, being such a large country with you know, such a large number of people, you are naturally going to see a lot more talent just arrive in those championships, because that was the American national single-seater championship to do that follows the steps up to IndyCar. So that's very much like, I don't know, UK Formula Renault, for example, except there's 350 million people in America and about 60-something million in the UK. So you've got a serious bag of talent there. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. The engineers over there are phenomenal, some of the work they do. It was, you know, it surpassed the stuff I'd experienced in the UK. And I'd be interested to compare it to some of the top F3 teams in Europe and so on.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Kat.
Sorry, didn't you do an Indy Light test as well? Or
yeah. So at the end of I walked through the 2013 season. I did it with two teams. I raced with a team called PRL Motorsports, who were initially the team we wanted to run with, but turned out we just weren't quite getting the results we wanted out of things, and there were a few disagreements. And both me and my teammate at the time were struggling, and he carried on with them and started to come good, and I decided to jump ship and go elsewhere during the season due to a couple of mishaps. And with that team switch was to Bilardi Auto Racing, who are quite well known in the States for Indy Lights wins and all sorts of other stuff. And part of the deal that kind of tempted us over was they offered us a day in the Indy Lights car at the end of the season. And I say a day, it was more of a one shot test really at the end of a 2-day test in USF. And in that 1 hour we had, I think Jack Harvey was in Indy Lights at the time. Yeah. And I was about, you know, it's a very much a, well, I did this, well, I did that. I was around half a second off Jack, I think, first going in the car. But, you know, you get whatever set of tyres have come off the actual driver who's testing on the day and everything else. But it was quite a heavy car. It was the older 97 chassis. A sequential stick that literally beats the hell out of your hand. Literally, I genuinely, you know, when you hit your funny bone, and your whole arm goes numb. I had like almost that 2 or 3 times during the drive where I'd come down or gone up a shift and literally went, Jesus Christ, like that is absolutely killing me. But yeah, around Barber Motorsports Park, which is really high right-hand G, the second half of the lap, you have this left that's flat out at 165-ish mile an hour. And then you come into the right you barely brake. You go down one gear, and then it's 270 degrees of right-handers, all sort of building and slowing. And by the last bit, your neck is just like hanging on for dear life. So after 2 days of testing in USF2000, I probably wasn't physically ready.
Yeah.
But it was a good test, and it's a shame I wasn't able to do any more of that.
And I assume that's due to budget and, you know, like anything else, right?
I think I remember them saying to me at the time it was something to the tune of like, I don't know, probably $35,000 to $45,000 for a day or something in an Indy Lights car, something like that. Look at his face.
Yeah.
We're just like, this is normal. We've heard this stuff, haven't we?
Yeah, you're like, oh, really? Okay, yeah.
It's like, what is this sport? So yeah, it's very expensive. The equipment you're using is obviously, you know, very high grade materials, and the amount of staff required and the logistics. It's understandable. And then a team actually has to make some money out of it as well. So, you know, it costs huge money, and it just wasn't feasible to get something like that together, unfortunately.
And
but I got a taste.
The people that you were competing against, Mike, the local drivers, let's just say, were they coming up from karting, or were some of them coming up from like the dirt background, like dirt ovals, like sprint cars and midgets and that kind of thing?
Yeah, there was a mixture. I think one of the guys I was against was Austin Cindric, who's pretty well known. He was
beat him.
yeah.
My notes here.
He wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't. I don't think he was at his prime at that point. Perhaps I don't know. He was with Andretti Autosport, I think, and he was around. I saw him occasionally here or there, but I think for most of once I'd moved to Bilardi, I was generally sort of in the top 7 or so. I think most of the time, and generally higher if it was a good weekend. So. Neil Alberico was another. He was a standout for me. Californian guy, typical surfer look. Really cool guy. There was Spencer Piggott, who I think made it to possibly IndyCar for a small amount of time. Certainly drove one.
Yeah.
A number of guys. R.C. Enerson, who I think has been in IndyCar as well since. So, but typically these guys had, you know, pretty strong financial backing in some form or another, even at the time. A guy called Scott Hargrove was in it, and his dad sponsored the whole Toronto Grand Prix, I think, something like that. So, yeah, when you're up against stuff like that, it's not disheartening as such, but it's a bit of an eye-opener again. It's a bit of a leveler. But yeah, some big names, definitely, you know, a lot of talent over there.
When you were at Barber, you had a couple of wins there in the Winter Series. Did you get to check out the motorcycle collection there at Barber?
Yeah, I actually spent quite a long time in that museum, to be honest, like way too long, to be honest. I can't actually remember how many times I went there, but I definitely hung out there quite a bit. My dad loved it because it's like they've taken a sort of small building out of a city and just filled it with cars and bikes and a couple of cool cafes and the rest. Yeah, I'll have to dig up the photos from that actually at some point, because I can't remember how many cars and bikes are there, but it's like close to 1,000 or something, isn't it?
Talk amongst yourselves. I have it written down.
You have a load of classic bikes.
It's in the blue folder.
But yeah, the bikes, cars, the lot. There was a massive amount of history there, and it was, you know, it's right on the exit of the corner onto the back straight, so every time you come down the dip there, you can literally see it. And at the time it was really cold, and it was quite nice and warm in there, so I was tempted just to jump out of my car, head over there for a coffee and just go stare at some more bikes.
Is it quite big or not, the museum?
I think it's got a lift. So
it's the biggest in the world. Motorbikes.
I'm sure it's something like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure it's something like 750 bikes or something like that.
I'm sure it's into 4 figures. I'm sure. And look at him, because the guy George Barber, the guy that built it, he just he sold his family dairy business.
That's right.
And the collection even went to the Guggenheim Museum.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is pretty cool. But I think he's got pretty much every bike you can think of. But what my favourite, Honda RC45.
Yeah, fair. I don't know much about bikes, so I'm sat here going, yeah.
I can tell by your facial expression.
But the thing I respect is whenever you watch, MotoGP these days, and you look back, you know how we look back at F1 drivers in the 70s and 80s and the safety differences, then apply that to bikes. And, we were still going really bloody fast back then. And I did look at a few of the bikes there and I thought, wow, like I wouldn't get on that now to drive down the road gently. And these guys were doing hundreds of miles an hour in them. I think they had a couple of the world speed bikes there as well, so world record setting.
Oh, they are cool. Yeah, they are really cool. The thing at that time as well is that, bear in mind, don't worry, folks, you're still tuned into the Porsche Sport podcast. The thing with those was the two-stroke bikes. Because they were trying to squeeze so much power out of them, you had to, all the riders rode with their hands over the clutch because it would just seize at any moment. Yeah. They used to call it whispering death. Because you were waiting for this, and you had to grab the clutch before it chucked you over the...
Locks you up and sends you off. Yeah, exactly. And that's just like when you're back in direct drive karting or anything, when, you seize a motor, that's it. See you later. Your rears are locked. So, yeah.
I didn't realise that. So that's what happens in a kart as well.
Yeah, when an engine seizes, if you've got a centrifugal clutch that just operates on its own by spinning, then you'll be all right. It will just go silent, and you'll just roll to a halt instantly. What's my dad gonna think and all that? But back in the days of direct drive, if it seized on a brake lockup, then it would just never unlock most of the time. You can end up just facing backwards or somewhere off the road. So luckily karts come to a halt quite quick. I think it's a lot worse if you're on two wheels.
When you dismount from the bike, I think is that's the issue. Well, let's talk about touring cars, because for those eagle-eyed amongst, will see there's a what's now known as a kind of archaic touring car, which is still plodding around in the British Touring Car Championship. I think they've just retired them now, but that is you ahead of four-time British Touring Car champion Colin Turkington. Tell us about how did the BTCC thing come about? So the sad part of it was that the American dream sort of ended quite abruptly in 2014. I didn't race that year either because the pot had just sort of dried. Everything had, a number of things had happened in one go to just result in me being put on the sidelines, and it just made no sense to race anything. I did one random Formula Renault race at the end of that year, and I don't know, I think it finished like 6th or something, which was okay. Who runs Team Hard Racing? He was talking to me over that winter between 2014 and 2015, and push came to shove in March, and very last second I decided to do a season of VW Cup with him, which is series that raced on the British GT calendar for a number of years, and it's had a few drivers have been in that and ended up in touring cars afterwards as a result. And I raced against Lucas Oreck, Tom Onslow-Cole, Howard Fuller, so a few guys that have dipped their toe in touring cars for sure, especially Tom. So did a season of that, won 5 races in the second half of the season, and easily was probably looking at doing the championship again and either trying to dominate it or do something else. And Tony offered me, in his typical style, a fairly late last minute opportunity to jump in a touring car in 2016. When I say late, it was like February. So it was literally like 3 weeks before. What do you think? And we were able to do it. So with the team support and some of our sponsors at the time, we were able to put the money together to do it. It was a proper sort of, do I or don't I sort of moment. I guess you sort of could view it as skipping a season out of just doing the same championship and pushing yourself to, bigger limits and bigger heights. So we did it. My first session was literally on the weekend in the car. So I don't know if Alan Gow's probably supposed to, I don't know what he'd think about that, because I'm sure you're supposed to do some mileage before you actually race in the championship, but who cares? It's 2016. So yeah, you've paid your money.
Yeah, my first proper session was basically FP2. So it was literally thrown in last second. Yeah, it was no testing, proper job. And by Thruxton, which is the third race weekend of the year, I was putting it in the top 10.
Which is great.
So, and that was the Toy Boater, as I called it as well, which is aptly named by Clarkson. But it was a 7-year-old Toyota Avensis chassis. So it wasn't really the freshest touring car on the grid. Possibly benefited at the time because that was the year they were on this kind of hybrid suspension situation where they were going between GPRM and RML suspension parts. So I was one of 6 or 7 cars just on the older suspension. It's actually quite possible some of the cars on the newer stuff were still having teething problems, trying to learn their setups and stuff. But it's not to take away from how good that year started off and how well we did with what we had. And by that point I was hooked, absolutely hooked. You know, I was getting some fans and I was enjoying the weekends, the autograph stuff, the interaction with people was really good fun. And the racing was actually, I quite liked it. You know, I like a good scrap and a good dogfight, more so when it's going in my favour, but it's still really good fun. And it was getting used to, you know, car contact and stuff being normal, like a door rub. And it, you know, it's loud. It's like, if you imagine, I'm trying to think what it sounds like, but
It's like being in a small car accident, basically.
pretty much.
You can imagine that noise, yeah.
When door panels touch, it's a very tinny, sharp, crunchy sound.
Yeah.
And it's a proper like in the side, and you're like, Jesus Christ, why do you do that? And then by about lap 4, you're like, okay, this is normal stuff. It's fairly standard. You know, in one race, you probably have 10 bumps or so, certainly, just little ones, you know, up the back end of the car or door to door, or just little shoves on lap 1. But yeah, that's how it all came about. And yeah, I did 2 years in it, second year in the Passat. So.
And was the Passat, was it? Forgive my memory, but was that the BMR car that went? Then Team Hard bought that car.
Yeah, so they took it. I think they introduced it to touring cars in like 2013, and then it sort of did its rounds with different teams, and BMR had some successful times with it on the older suspension, mind. And then Tony acquired 3 of them. And obviously we had to update to complete RML suspension as well, which is something like £80,000 a car or something like that. It was like big money, all the upgrades. And the touring car budgets are crazy. I'll tell you that for free. The cost of it all is monstrous, but I guess that's what makes it what it is. But all of this stuff was brand new. So I think, according to my memory, with the new tyre, which was stiffer, and the suspension parts, the whole car was something like, and I could be wrong, I could have been being told fibs here, but something like 50% stiffer. So it was a really big change. The cars didn't roll as much; they bounced a lot, and you, rather than running loads of camber, you sort of stood the car up a bit more and you know, set it up a bit more normally at first. So yeah, it was a big change. So it was quite hard to compare like with like, when people say, oh, well, you know, this team had the car, then that team had the car. There are homologation changes every year. So, you know, we're about to see that when the hybrid era happens in touring cars. I bet things will completely be turned on their head. So yeah.
Would you like to go back to touring car if you had the shot?
If I had £500,000 to throw at it, then yeah, but I wouldn't want to do it.
Touring car over. If you had £500,000, would it be touring car? Would that be?
You see, that's the thing. I'd probably consider something like LMP 3 or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like fast cars, and I remember that every time I get in a really quick car, and I think, why do I do touring cars? But you'll know this, Kat, you kind of go where your nose takes you sometimes in racing. It's just where the opportunities come. And yeah, I guess as a result, I've ended up kind of having a breadth of experience in a lot of different machinery. But to have one sort of return to touring cars competitively, I would like to do, because it would be a kind of go and get the results that I felt like I could have got at the time.
Yeah, with the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, more to prove it to myself than anyone else, really. Because I always had belief in what I could do, but it matter. I mean, look at George Russell last weekend is a perfect example of you can be an absolute, blazing talent, but he's never scored a point in F1.
Absolutely, because it's so dependent on money, as we've spoken about anyway, and teams and prep, and it proved that, didn't it, very much with the F1 at the weekend. Take him straight out of a Williams, put him obviously in a Mercedes, and
where he was sat like
Sean
this
Lewis.
as well.
Yeah,
about 4 inches too high.
Yeah, I'm sure Lewis is worried.
Yeah,
how well he did, but absolutely.
Talking about hybrid, I mean, hybrid is a massive factor in global motorsport, and nobody necessarily seems to have the right idea about what the manufacturers want, what the fans want, and I trying to make all those things fit together. And touring cars is a really interesting one for me, because obviously all the cars that people watching on TV, it's one of the very few sports now that's available free to air. Certainly one of the very few motorsports that's available live on free television. And obviously the cars are like, a Ford Focus, BMW 3 Series, what else? A Seat Leon or whatever. And they're cars that, a regular everyday person would drive to work every day is what they look like on the screen. And adding hybrid and adding a hybrid element into that is obviously is more relevant. However, the bit that we talked about this briefly before, Mike, about British touring cars, how you've got this formula that seems so commercially appealing, but you've still got really good drivers like yourself who are having to come up with colossal amounts of money to go racing in touring cars. It seems to me that there's something missing, and when you implement hybrid into that, it's not going to help the cost get lower. In fact, it's going to put the cost up unless they make a lot of quite radical changes with the rest of the car.
Unless some form of funding as a result of the hybrid move blankets the touring car field. I'd be interested. I'm going to watch quite, with interested eyes as to what happens over the next few years, because it's not easy to raise a budget to race in anything, and to race in touring cars, not to discredit anyone, but I know a lot of guys that probably should be in a race car that aren't. And I know a lot of guys that are in a race car that maybe, haven't necessarily worked as hard in terms of their driving etiquette to earn their position in where they are. There's a diplomatic way to put it, but there's a huge amount of talent that is, going unseen, and has always gone unseen, in fairness, in motorsport. But I wonder if it's getting worse. It's a tough one to talk about, because I'm partly involved in it in a way. But the hybrid change is, I've heard some of the prices from team managers and the rest, and it's not going to be an easy sum to swallow, especially after this season and the impact of the pandemic on really everyone in every sector. I'm pretty certain teams are, sweating a little bit at the moment. And as a result, you may just see more and more drivers that are there purely because they're able to be financially, and not so much based on much else. But then hopefully things may change. It all depends on what kind of funding and financial support is available for drivers, and whether the sponsorship game changes again in the next 5 or 10 years. But at the moment, it's definitely going to be challenging for anyone.
But is there any kind of musings at all that the manufacturers might, because at the moment the manufacturers must be laughing, because they're effectively got other people spending a ton of money to market their products on Sunday afternoon telly, and they're in a lot of cases having to spend absolutely nothing on that. So they must be thinking, well, let's not rock the boat here, guys.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And I speak to a few guys that used to do it back when they could get a wage and get a salary for it, like Chris Hodgetts and a few of the other boys. And I sort of think, well, why is it so different? I guess marketing budgets are tighter. Everyone's got a bit less money that they can spend. but yeah, I would hope that things could sway back towards how they were. But I think in reality, when you can advertise your brand in so many new ways in the past 10 years, that's far more financially efficient. Mm-hmm. I wonder how that's going to happen. So we'll see. You know, like you say, you couldn't have predicted how this year has happened 2 years ago. And you just don't know what's going to happen in the world over the next 5 or 10 years. Everything could go fully electric, you know, in a very sort of short period of time. Mm-hmm. And there is certainly some backing and some funding and a lot of interest in electric motorsport. Mm-hmm. So it's probably a good move by touring cars, purely because a lot of the new family affordable or close to, you know, working in that direction, hatchbacks and saloons and stuff are officially hybrid cars as well. So they can then be introduced into the championship. But again, you know, will the manufacturers provide good enough backing to warrant that, or will they be relying on, you know, driver acquired budgets? I don't know. We'll see.
So just talking of 2020, moving on to, you know, kind of how it's been for you. Obviously, sim racing has been a huge part of the kind of motorsport ecosystem this year. I mean, how important has that been for you? We've just before we came online, we've had a MTV Cribs-esque view of your sim rig and what have you. But how's it been for you? Because some drivers have really enjoyed it, and some are quite happy to have it in the rearview mirror. Where's your view on it?
For me, obviously, it's been positive because I've done well through it. I've earned money from it, so through prize givings and the rest of it. So I've certainly gained exposure from it. I almost got a slight head start on people because I moved here to Northampton in January. I spent the whole of New Year and January and Christmas in New Zealand, where my mum's from. And I bought loads of bits to sort of build a sim. I've always wanted to have a sim, but living at home, as you tend to, a bit longer than normal when you're, you know, racing, because all your money's going into that. Yeah, I've always wanted a proper sim. I've loved using the sim. I've been a member on iRacing for years and years because they were actually a sponsor of mine when I was in the United States.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So always been into it, but it was always a desk-mounted steering wheel and a set pedals on the floor with one screen. It wasn't anything crazy. And you know, this year, a lot of drivers have gone full beans with it and got themselves a decent sim and had a crack at it. For me, it's been great. It's been a world that's existed for ages. I've met loads and loads and loads of sim racers virtually and spoken to many of them at length. You know, during the first lockdown, we even had a virtual pub night, very much like this, except with a lot more people generally sat at their rigs, having a drink and a chat and a laugh, and, you know, maybe going onto a server and, you know, crashing into each other and whatnot. It was, you know, it was a really nice social atmosphere, and it actually kept me going when I live alone for the first time in my life. And then bang, lockdown happens. So for me, it was a savior, really, more than anything socially. But it also allowed me to, you know, gain exposure by racing against guys like Stoffel Van Dorn, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen. Literally couldn't dream of it, could you really? But I was able to race virtually with them. And some might say it's not that big a deal, but for me, it's like, well, that's literally him sat on his rig somewhere in the world, and that's me. And for that moment, we're racing against each other, and it's something I never was ever able to raise the funds to do in real life. So
and it's on an equal playing field as well.
Absolutely.
We'd like to think. I think obviously equipment and, you know, how much you know about it probably plays a part in it, just as it does in real motorsport. It's the same with everything, isn't it? You know, like you said, with golf, or what clubs are you using, etc., etc. So there's always a background to it, but certainly more similar in terms of the virtual thing you're doing should be the same. You know, you're in two cars that should be the same track, same tires, same everything. Mm-hmm. So you'd like to argue it's fair. And yeah, I did really well. I won quite a lot of stuff, and it felt like it was a little bit of a, you know, I have that kind of, for me, kind of like, yeah, I can pull a good result, because I feel like I've not always put myself in the most competitive car throughout my career, as a result of budget and everything else. And in this scenario, I was able to race on a more level playing field with, really awesome, bunch of racing drivers.
Yeah, current Formula One drivers. I mean, what other sport could you have that opportunity? It's incredible. Of course, this is time for a self-indulgent moment, Mike. We are the reigning Movember LMP1 champions. I'm waiting for my Rolex to come in the post since we won at Le Mans, and
I think it would just be a digital picture of one because it's the sim race. So.
Yeah, that's fine. I can put it on my wall then. A hologram. And it was quite fun because this is one of the things again that you could never do in the real world. Obviously, when we were sharing the driving bit, obviously in completely different places, but we were, while you were in the car, we were just sort of chatting away as we are now. Then when I got in the car, it very, very quickly, in fact, immediately morphed into a coaching session. And Kat, you'll like this one. Mike goes, Have you raced before, Peter? I'm like, no. He's like,
Yeah.
Wasn't that bad, was it? That sounds like a typical. A lot of my friends will go, yeah, that's him. I'm fair. I don't mince my words. That's probably the best.
No, it was fine. And then coming through the Porsche curves, there was an LMP2 car that really I think I'd left plenty of room. Turned out I hadn't, and here is in the background, Mike going, I better write them a message to say sorry. Like, if you wouldn't mind.
I was there as the sort of diplomat to apologise to them at the time and say, really sorry, Pete thought he left enough room. I think he might have had a small moment. But again, it all comes with, what equipment you're using, what it's like to drive your end, in your house on your sim. You could even, there's very basic things that a lot of guys don't know about how to set their sim up that can slow down the response time of the steering and everything. Loads and loads of little things I learned over, a pretty speedy sort of 2-month process of setting up my sim. And so, the errors are not necessarily your fault, and I'm giving you that one for free. You can use that.
It's very generous, yeah.
But, I see it as a coach. I see it all the time as well. You have a brand new driver to something, and you watch them make all the errors that you made, and your job is to just help them learn why those errors happened. You don't have, you're going to make them.
Yeah.
And I quite enjoyed it actually, just walking you through how to avoid that next time. Just try to take the chicanes, for God's sake. That was the one. I remember that. I was like, 4 chicanes, no, not there, back out, wait. And through that, how long were you in the car for? An hour and a half or so?
No, about 2. It was 3 stints, so it was pretty much 2 hours. Yeah.
So it was.
But I missed. Well, we were too busy chatting, and I forgot that I had to come into pit.
Yeah, we were probably having a bit too much fun just chatting away, weren't we? But I think we were quite relaxed at the time because we were leading.
Yeah.
By a good amount as well. So, but it was enjoyable. I'm sure you'd agree, from the start of that run to the end, you come out a completely different driver.
I can't believe how much quicker I am now since in the days after. Like, this is like, braking that a little bit later, turning in that a little bit later, using more of the road. And I watch, it's amazing because you watch an onboard, sometimes I watch onboards and I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at here. But I think if you have it explained to you, you're like, okay, that's what I'm doing, and that's what somebody who's good is doing it as well.
It's like looking at a page full of like coding or something, and then when someone explains what that line of code creates and what that, you then start to understand what you're looking at. And it's the same with data, with a new driver. It's just, it all ingrains in the same way into motorsport. So it was really good fun, and we very luckily got the result, didn't we, in the end?
We did well. We did have 5 minutes in the pit lane, which wasn't our fault, when you got sent to the sky by some clown spinning at the opening chicane. But Kat, you've got to come and join us next time.
Yeah, I will do. I promise.
It'd be a pro.
Be
this time.
The handicap.
No, that's.
It was good.
We Mike, we do on the Porsche Sport podcast, we always do something we call the Racing Genie question. And it's when the Racing Genie grants you a wish where you can do any race you like in any car you like and with any teammate. So Larry Tenford, he said a Porsche Cup car at Monaco with Ayrton Senna. Earl Bamber, being the frustrated NASCAR driver that he is, he said the Daytona 500 with Dale Earnhardt. What other ones have we had? I
can't remember now.
Oh, I can't. There's been so many. I can't remember what did Pat and York choose? York chose the 2004 White Lightning and Le Mans.
Yeah.
I can't remember whose choice was, but so what would your choices be, Mike?
I've got a number of ideas in my head, and it really depends on what the aim of the weekend is. Because you could do Monaco in any of the 90s F1 cars with James Hunt. That'd be a mad weekend. That'd be good fun. Or
it would be a mad weekend.
You'd have a good time, yeah.
Definitely.
Off the circuit.
Yeah, most likely. No, that'd be, the more money would be spent probably off the circuit than on, wouldn't it? Or in a more, real sort of a professional, I suppose, answer would probably be Le Mans. Over it's grown on me over my whole career, but now if anyone asked me something I'd actually want to do, it would be Le Mans. In either LMP2 or LMP1, but I think LMP2 probably, because as far as a overall driver's car, it's a proper piece of kit, and I'd probably leave the hybrid side of LMP1 at this point. It's fun on iRacing, and it was very helpful for us, but I feel like a P2 car, I'd just love to jump in and try. And teammate, he's got to be fast, doesn't he? So it's really hard. I've actually, as a result of this year, been talking quite a lot with Jenson Button, and I've been a fan for forever. In fact, one of my early helmets was based on a similar platform to his. So I felt so cheesy telling him that as well. But I think I'd say that because he's just an all-round brilliant bloke, and he's still absolutely wicked. So I think that'd be it. Yeah, Le Mans with Button in a P2 car, which I think's almost happened virtually anyway. So
what's your FIA grade, Mike?
My FIA grade would probably be silver, I'm guessing. It is silver, actually, yeah.
Right.
So,
Jensen, are you watching? Are you there, Jensen? Jensen's a platinum, I guess, still.
Yeah, I think
so it'll be Jensen, Mike, and Kat. There you go. And Le Mans next year. Jensen, he can pick up the bill. It's fine.
He's saying, how much money are you bringing, guys? Come on. The budget, Le Mans budget is unreal, isn't it?
I heard that just to do Le Mans, if you want to buy a seat in an LMP2 at Le Mans, it's £1 million.
Probably around about that. Yeah.
I would have thought that wouldn't.
I like how you two are like,
It's because we hear it every day. We literally hear it every day.
That's quite normal.
Yeah, it's normal. It's completely normal. When you talk about it to someone at the pub or something, and their eyes are rolling back into their head at the numbers, and you're just sat there like, well, I was talking to someone about this last week, and they've just sealed a £250,000 deal with some sponsor of some sort or some team, and it's just normal conversation. I guess you become strangely numbed to it over time.
You do. Yeah. Absolutely, you do. It becomes like monopoly money. Like you don't think it's real anymore, kind of thing. Like it just, you're so used to those numbers. It doesn't have an impact anymore, I suppose.
It's crazy. I found that when I was in the whiskey trade, it was like that, because you would come into a customer and they would say, all right, how much is this? It's a 1987 Macallan, but it's £800 on the shelf. And they're like, it's a bit expensive. I'm like, well, actually, no, there's one that's double the price. And you're talking about £800 for a bottle of whiskey. Like it is obviously all relative. And you think, I guess it's the same thing where you just, you know what I think if you understand where that money goes, you understand why it's that much, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's when I say, "Oh yeah, the car's only £80,000 plus."
Yeah.
Plus VAT, but it's VAT. It's VAT. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Someone sat there going, "What? Are you mental?" And I'm like, probably, yeah, actually. We all do this because there's a certain thrill that we get from it. There's obviously a lot of personal aims and ambitions that we develop over time doing it. And you're forever going to strive to meet them because you've spent such a long time working towards that purpose in the first place. So, and I have to look back at the times with, I'm sort of explaining myself as to why I do this, but as a lad and dad sort of outfit in karting, I'd probably never change any of that. It was the thing that me and dad did at weekends. That was what we did. It was great fun. We spent time. He definitely spent time cleaning out carburetors and all that back in the day. And, every time I mention that, even today, I still see that, a bit of a wry smile on his face from all the sort of tough struggles, but good times that came from it.
Yeah, well, what a cool way to finish. It's not many people can say they've driven the full course at Sebring on New Year's Day. I don't think many people can say that. So
30-degree weather as well, by the way.
Magic. Well, what a cool way to finish. Mike, thanks so much for coming on to the show and having a chat, and for carrying me around Le Mans the other week. That was hugely appreciated. Now,
anytime.
how do our viewers and listeners get follow you on social media and stuff like that? Tell us about that.
So over time, I've managed to get the same handle on everything now. So it's just Epps Racer, spelt EPP Epps and then Racer. I'd hope you know how to spell Racer, in which case don't follow me if you don't. But Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, in general, I'm on all those. I'm not crazily active at the moment because life's busy, and people have got bigger problems, I think, than for me to be posting stuff that doesn't matter. So, but you can follow me on there. I generally keep things up to date. Might have some interesting news towards the end of this year and going into next, but we'll see, hopefully. So, yeah, follow me on there. Feel free to ask me any questions or, just see what I'm doing, and I might follow you back. Who knows?
And also, for those watching, I can tell you that Mike is a very talented barista as well. You should be Instagramming your flat whites in the morning, Mike. That's how you get all your likes going through the roof.
Yeah, I did a stint as a barista back in 2014 for a bit. Kind of just left motorsport and went and did something different for a bit, which was really fun. Also a musician, so I have quite a few interests outside the sport that definitely kept me going when we've been unable to be at the racetrack this year.
Fantastic stuff. Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming to join us on the Porsche Sports podcast, and we'll see you out on the track very soon.
Perfect. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
The Porsche Sport Podcast, powered by Porsche Centre Leeds. Test drive the new Porsche Taycan and experience Soul Electrified.